on, guys? Welcome to Praska Boys Garage, and we are in the state of Iowa, and today is a very rainy day, so what better than to spend it inside the shop working on projects. Now, next to me on the table, I do have a vintage mini bike that came with a white Tecumseh motor. I'm not going to be using that motor. Instead, we're going to be transplanting this Predator. Now, I still want to stick to the original paint scheme that mini bike had. Therefore, we need to make this thing white in color. I'm going to be doing a powder coating process for you guys in this video where I tear apart the entire motor. We go ahead and add some aftermarket accessories. We remove the governor and also remove the oil sensor before we put it all back together. This one's going to be a fun one, and I cannot wait to share it with you guys. The first thing we're going to do is step number one, and that is tear this thing 100% apart. Don't need that.
We don't need this anymore. Yeah! Well, we don't really need this, so I'll just chuck it over there.
Now, in real time, you guys, that process probably took me close to 2 hours to get it 100% disassembled. But that's just the necessary evil that we have to take in order to get this paint job looking perfect. So one thing to note, all seals, all gaskets, all bearings, everything has to come out, because when we ultimately put this stuff in the oven at 450 degrees, that stuff's going to ooze out oil, and it's just going to get in the paint and cause it to bubble, where we just have to start over and do it all over again. So we want to avoid doing this job twice. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and finish off the case. Because we're not putting a governor back in, we do need to plug this hole, and then the oil sensor hole in the back. I'll end up tapping those and threading bolts in. Once that's done, we'll go ahead and get everything into the wash tank. Alright guys, so I just finished washing all the parts of this motor, and my next step is to throw them into the sandblast cabinet and start removing any leftover residue, paint, flakes, oil stains, things like that, anything that may come out through the powder and cause a disruption in the paint. Now, after that, I will be throwing them into this oven. As you can see, I've got a part in there right now, and what I'm doing is the outgassing process. So once it is completely stripped, we're going to bake it one time at 450 degrees. That way any oils or anything that are trapped in the pores of the metal will come out, and that way we've got a perfect finish once we apply that powder. So this is going to be a time lapse of me hitting those two steps. Alright guys, well it's time to start laying down some powder, so let's get prepped. We're going to start with this side piece, and the first thing I'm going to do is take some acetone, wipe the whole thing down, that way it's 100% clean of any debris, that way we don't have any problems with the powder going on. Now we also need some high temp tape and some silicone plugs, because we got to plug all the holes, as well as tape off this back, because let's face it, we don't want any powder coating on the inside of this motor. Now once that is complete, we're going to throw it back in the oven, raise that temperature up to about 200 degrees. That way this powder really adheres and gets in all the crevices. White's pretty difficult to get to be 100% clean on the first try, so we want to use that heat to give it a little bit extra layer, and that way it's completely covered. As far as my setup is concerned, I will be using the Eastwood gun. It's got the dual voltage on it. Right now I'm going to set it to the highest voltage. I'm going to use a small little Craftsman compressor, and we're going to go ahead and get this thing covered, put it in the oven, and let's check out to see how the first one looks. Guys, I'm going to tell you what, there is no one on the planet that is more excited than I am right now. Holy crap, this thing turned out super freaking cool. It is just like glass. Look at it, guys. It turned out so freaking good. Holy cow. Okay, so a lot of you might be thinking, why am I tearing apart an entire motor and powder coating it just to put it back together? Why not just grab some high temp spray paint and do it? Well, because that's not how we do it on Praska Boys Garage. We're going full send on this motor, and this thing looks absolutely freaking awesome. I cannot wait to get all of it done. So I'm going to keep going through the time lapse, you guys, putting on powder, baking the parts, getting them out. So here we go. Let's just do it. Woo! All right, now let's give you guys a quick little update on this powder process. The two parts that I have in the oven right now are back in for their second coat. There was a little bit of mist powder in certain crevices, so we went ahead and hit them for a second powder, put them back in the oven, and those two are curing right now. Also, I went ahead and put the first layer of powder on this head. It does give me the most concern because of all those fins and crevices. It's going to be hard to get powder right in where we want it, so I hit it the best I could after we had heated it up. So I think I've got a pretty good base layer. We'll find out after it cures. I'm most likely going to have to hit this one twice. So just to give you guys an update, those two coming out, that one going in, keep on keeping on. All right, quick update in the process, guys. I just showed you a quick view after the first coat. It's been a couple days since then. I'm back in the shop, so we've put the head back in the oven. I'm warming it back up to temperature, and we're getting ready to shoot it for the second time. Now on the rack, you'll see what I've gotten completed so far, and that white is looking so fresh, so clean. Powder coating, there's just nothing like it. So, of course, I do what I always do, and I leave the hardest things for last, and these three things are the last pieces that we have before we can start reassembling. Now, when it comes to this case, guys, it's going to take me a while to get it completely clean, plug all the holes, lay all the tape. But on top of that, I didn't quite know how I was going to powder it and fit it in the oven. So I fabbed up this plate. I welded a couple bolts. That way it could be completely off the ground and cure all the way around. So the next thing I'm going to do, we're going to get these two pieces in the oven, get them up to temp and spray them. And while that is curing, I'm going to go ahead and start prepping the case. We're going to do the case absolutely last. I don't know why I do it to myself, but hey, here we go. All right, you guys, you know what this means. Now that those two pieces are done, I can no longer procrastinate this case. It's time to get it done. So I went ahead and sandblasted that plate, so that thing is now outgassing in the oven. Once that's done, we're going to go ahead and throw this inside, get it up to temperature, and start laying down that powder. Now, I've got to say, you guys, this part gave me the most anxiety over this entire build. That's why I procrastinated it till the end. But here's the result after coat number 1, looking super smooth, super fresh. This is exactly what I had envisioned. Now, there are a few areas that we do need to touch up, including in these fins. You can see not all the paint got quite in. So while this thing is lowering back down in temperature, I'm going to get it set up back in the booth. We're going to hit it with that second coat. Back in the oven it will go, and when it comes out, we should be 100% completed with the powder coating. All right, now that that final piece is completed and out of the oven, I can officially say we are done with laying down powder. So now it is time for final assembly. But before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and take all the internal components. I'm going to run them inside the house. I'm going to wash them with some hot water and soap. That way we get them extra clean before we put this thing 100% back together. So I'm going to go ahead and just skip over the time lapse, and I'll see you guys back when everything is clean. And there you go. All the parts now are cleaned and back on the table and ready for assembly. I did go ahead and pick up a brand new gaskets kit for this motor, as well as 2 new seals. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pop the seals and the bearings in. I'm also going to hone the cylinder before we go ahead and put the crank and the piston in. All right, now that both seals and both bearings are in, I'm going to move my attention towards this piston and rod. We're going to get that set and torqued down. We're also going to throw the cam in and the rods in. That way we can 100% button up the bottom end. All right, guys, with the finish line just around the corner, the bottom end is now completed. Let's go ahead and move on to the top end. All right, guys, well, coming up is the final time lapse of this build. What you're going to see me do is install a lighting coil. That is because the mini bike this motor is going into does have a headlight. We also had to order a new flywheel that has the magnets to charge that coil. Throwing the fan on, throwing the coil on. I'm going to get the pull string set up and put that on, and finally put the heat shields on and call this thing a wrap. So here we go on the final time lapse of this build. Alright guys, that is a wrap for this video, and the motor turned out absolutely amazing, and from the clip you just saw, it's also running great as well. Now I do have 2 things left to do to finish up this motor before it can go back in the mini bike. The first of which is to install the carburetor. I ordered a 22mm Mikuni, and it should be here later this week. The second thing is the charge coil and the flywheel were rubbing on each other, and it wasn't allowing the motor to completely turn over. So I've got to get that figured out because it is a complete restoration on that mini bike, and I've got to have the headlight working. Now, I want to say thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. It really makes me feel good knowing that I'm creating content that you guys enjoy. Also, huge shout out to Dan and Rimright. That guy gave me a ton of tips and tricks to make sure this motor turned out amazing. He's my powder coat guy that does all my projects for me. If you're into powder coating, I'll put a link to his channel down in the description below. Go check him out. And if you guys want to see the rest of this build with the mini bike, make sure to subscribe, turn on your notifications, because that's going to be next. So like always, we will see you on the next one.